Hello, everyone. Welcome to Paraton's Mission Transition Live podcast, brought to you by Paraton's Military and Veterans team. We have the whole team with us here this afternoon, which is myself, Brent Buffington, and Jeff Carson. Many of you may have met us in person at some point at some career fairs or messaged with us on LinkedIn or via email or what have you. So we're certainly glad to have everyone with us today. So today's going to be what we're calling navigating your career move with confidence. So what today's really going to talk about is our whole series of podcasts that we really deliver over a series of 6 months. So we're going to touch briefly on each podcast, what it delivers, why it might be worth attending. So you kind of get an idea of what kind of information each one of those different broadcasts are going to deliver for you. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and kick this bad boy off. So I'll go ahead and start off today. I'll introduce myself. My name is Brian Acton. I've been in recruiting, retention, and sourcing, you name it, for over 24 years now. I've done it on multiple facets with the Department of Defense, federal government, contract and corporate sectors. I'm also a veteran of both the Marine Corps and the Army, and I've been with Paraton for years. So I'll go ahead and kick it over to my partner, Brent, and let Brent introduce himself.
My name is Brent Buffington, former U.S. Army, retired, former 35 Mike, human intelligence collector. Right before I retired, I actually jumped into recruiting just because I wanted to test that out, see how it was. So I did that with the military for a little bit, then jumped right over into the private sector, and kind of bread and butter from that side was linguistics, hiring linguists for Guantanamo Bay, South Palm, those areas. So that was pretty awesome. And then I saw Paraton. They reached out and asked me to jump on the team. And I've been doing it for almost 2.5 years now, and I absolutely love it.
Thanks, Brent. Jeff, go ahead and introduce yourself as well.
Hey, hello, everybody. My name is Jeff Carson. I am one of the military veterans talent members as well. I've been at Paraton for roughly 7 years now. I am also a retired Army veteran. Kind of got my feeling in being a recruiter, was a former Army recruiter. And after I transitioned, I went into talent acquisition, supporting numerous defense contractors, specializing in supporting the transitioning veteran community, and also military spouses. So, as I said, been with the company 7 years, love what I do, love giving back, and we'll move it on over to the next steps. Thanks, Brian.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, Jeff. So what we're going to do now is something, because this previous first session of our series, for everyone listening, used to be more of us talking about our experiences with transition and some of the obstacles and adversities we ran into trying to transition and how we overcame them. So we did change that up a little bit today, as we're going to talk about the totality of our series. But what we also wanted to do was still give a brief delivery of a little bit about our transition experiences, and a little bit about what we went through. I know for myself, I served in the infantry before I went into recruiting as well. So I was lucky enough to be able to make that kind of career shift, and I stayed in recruiting for the military for 10 years. So that's where I certainly was able to hone my skills very well doing that for over 10 years. But I know for me, the transition piece getting out was certainly a lot more difficult than I thought it was going to be. I know finding a role, understanding how to write a resume, negotiating salary, or even what I should be paid was really difficult for me to kind of really get a grasp on. I really struggled with writing a resume that made sense for the civilian market, if you will, being able to really translate my military recruiting experience into what it should read like on a civilian resume to make it relatable experience at the same time. I know I personally, when I was applying to roles, I must have been writing it in a way that didn't seem like I had that much experience. So they always wanted me as like an entry-level recruiter or something like that. And I was, no, I've got way more experience than that. So that was one of the big hurdles I went through. When I started out, I didn't have any LinkedIn network. LinkedIn wasn't quite as big as it is now, but it was still existed anyway. So I didn't know how to do any of the social media for job searching. My interview skills weren't the best. I've certainly honed those over the years. understanding job descriptions and qualifications and really understanding how I met those qualifications or didn't meet those qualifications was definitely a tough one for me. I was lucky able to figure it out. So, hopefully, with our series, if folks, hopefully can attend all 6 pieces of the series, you'll definitely gain some insider information and insights into, the lessons we've learned and the things that we see and do every day. What about Jeff? Jeff, go ahead. Let's hear yours.
Well, I would probably say my biggest struggle with transitioning is really understanding the job description. Sometimes as veterans, we can do a lot of things because we've been kind of, trained to do that. Wherever duty assignment you're at, you learn how to do this additional duty, how one thing is done at this level, you get promoted, it's at another level. But when I looked at job descriptions, when I first transitioned, I just had this, I could do the job. And not really understanding what were they looking for? What was the requirements? What was, really reading, understanding the job description and saying, hey, it's not about I can do that job. It's about showing when you applied for the position, what skills and qualifications to show it that matches with what we're looking for. So it was a humbling experience for me because I always told myself, well, I can do that job. I can do a lot of things. I can pick it up. I can learn it. Those are things that I told myself until eventually I just had to come to the conclusion that's just not how it works, and it's not going to work. And that's when I finally even started applying for jobs that really was a close match for what my background was. So that was probably my biggest thing and I had to come to the conclusion, you can't do everything out here. You may have in the military, they may allow you to do things on the spot and allow you to get on the job training, but some positions are just not set up like where you're able to just learn on the job. They need you to do it, day one. And so I would say that's my biggest short call deficiency thing that I had to fix as I transition.
Gotcha. So I'd say kind of the theme right now is almost it's a little bit of humbling when you start that job search process. That it's a lot harder than it can initially seem like it's going to be. So
yeah,
Brent, go ahead. Let's hear your transition story.
My biggest hurdle was kind of relating to, coming out of the military and being intel, having the little bit of experience I did with recruiting. It was just hard relating that and basically transferring that into the civilian side. And the SFL tabs were great, going through those, the career one source, all those were great resources. But it was just hard because coming out of the military, you were structured, you had a battle rhythm, you could look at what you were doing a year out. So you knew what every day consisted of, when block leave was starting. So it was a hurdle to get thrown out there, and it was the fear of the unknown that was basically my biggest hurdle because I was so used to the structure and knowing what each day looked like. So that was probably my biggest one. But being able to talk to people I never had a problem with, especially coming out of intel, you can pretty much talk your way in and out of any situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I appreciate everyone giving your stories here, and we'll go ahead and move forward with the meat and potatoes of today's podcast. So, what we're going to talk about today. So, we titled this one "Navigating Your Career Move with Confidence," because that's really what we're trying to put in play here as we're dealing. Well, the podcast itself and the information we're delivering is tailored more towards transitioning service members or veterans. However, if there are folks on the call that are not either of those, the information is still fantastic and you will still get something from it, I promise, because the information we're delivering, though, is relevant to everyone. So we called it Navigating Your Career Move with Confidence, so that after you've gone through our complete series over the 6-month period, you will definitely have gained really huge insider information on translating your experience, what we do on a daily basis as a team, helping folks master their resume and make it fit for the organization, decoding job descriptions, really understanding of a job description, what things mean in the job description, what's most important to you or less important to you in those, to be able to do self-assessments, mastering resumes and applicant tracking systems, optimization. So that one, it's going to be more on the lines of, not necessarily the information translation, but more on the design effectiveness and how to use that resume effectively and what makes sense when making a resume and formatting and so forth. Then social networking for job searching. This is probably our team's favorite one. I think everyone here on the team is avid LinkedIn users. So that session's really focused on LinkedIn, but how to use it in a very effective manner so that when you're doing the job search or just building your LinkedIn presence on how to do that effectively and get value from it, really, because we want folks to be able to add value by using our LinkedIn information. And then, of course, mastering interview success. That's where we talk about how to use all the things we've done prior to prepare for the interview. And that goes into a lot of detail. That's probably one of my favorite ones too, because it's really helped me hone the interview experience as well, so that it's less stressful. And I come out of the interview feeling very well with interviews when I've done them, and so forth. So that's kind of what we're talking about today. So we're going to do brief little snippets on each podcast that we deliver, so folks get a taste of some of the information that we talk about within those. So hope everyone stays along the ride with us today. So, because how it's going to go is we're going to run through this. It should take less than an hour, maybe an hour. Depends on how talkative we get. We are recruiters, so we do like to talk. But it should take us quite an hour. Kind of depends. And then after that, we do have an hour window for a full Q&A. Where you can ask us anything, and we're more than happy to answer those questions. And certainly feel free while we're on any slide talking about anything. If you want to drop a question in the chat, we'll make sure to be able to get to those questions as well. So thanks everyone for joining us today, and we'll go ahead and move on to the first one. So translating your experience is on February 21st next month. So really what we talk about on that one, these are the main bullet points, if you will: career goal alignment, concise job interview, showcasing impact, quantifying achievements, and transferable skills identification. So there's a lot in there to really unpack when we talk about that one, but I wanted to just really kind of discuss some of the higher top end pieces, if you will. I know the big one that I think for me on this one, we all might have a different opinion. For me, it's the career goal alignment section, where we're really talking about a career-focused objective statement. For me as a recruiter, and many of the recruiters I've worked with over the years, the objective statement is probably one of the biggest portions of your resume, realistically, because as recruiters, we're going to read your contact information. We're going to look at your objective statement. And that objective statement should really be telling me a very fast, quick elevator pitch of who you are, what you do, and what you're looking to do. Because if it doesn't do that, if it's too broad, too narrow, I know one thing we run into a lot, especially with our military folks that are transitioning or that we're working with, the objective statement has too much information on it, where it's, they did some human resources, logistics, operations, all that kind of, they'll have 10, 5 or 6 different things they can do on there. And sometimes you don't want to make it that broad because it's not really laying a focus of why you're qualified for the roles that you're applying to, because it's too broad. So that's just an example of one that we put on there. And that's one of my favorite ones. I really like talking about the objective statement. Jeff, what about yourself? Is there anything, when we do this particular translating your experience one, is there one that sticks out more to you?
That's a big one. And typically that one's at the top of the page. So yeah, that's important. That first page, people are kind of looking at, what do you do? And as you mentioned, Brian, especially if you've had a long career in the military, sometimes the strategy is I'll just throw everything in it. And hopefully this recruiting person will call me and ask questions about this particular area that they may be interested in. And that's just not a reality, because if you got 5 different things in there, I don't know which one that is the most important, the one that you're really, the direction that you're looking to go into. So I definitely agree with that. It's the first attention getter. What do you do? What experience do you do? You could even, sometimes people even list their clearance in it. So it goes back to the attention span of recruiters and the time that they have. And so you want to grab their attention and be totally focused. As I always mention, I have a background in transportation, but when on my resume, it doesn't mention anything about it because that's not what I want you to focus on. I want you to focus on recruiting and talent acquisition. So you kind of got to have that mindset the same way. So totally agree with you on that one, Brian.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you hit a kind of a key point there, though, too, is relevancy of the information. That's why we really talk about quite a bit is information relevancy. As Jeff mentioned, transportation. I was infantry before recruiting, and infantry's nowhere on my resume either, and stuff like that. Now, so for folks that are on the call that don't know, Brent's been on the team for a few months now, so he hasn't done this particular podcast with us yet. But obviously Brent's been in recruiting for a while as well. Brent, do you have anything particular as it comes to translating your experience that you would like to throw in there or talk about specifically?
Absolutely. Going back to kind of the same things that you and Jeff have said in the past and on the previous podcast are transferable skill identification. The words jack of all trades, there's no such thing. Yeah, you've done everything in the Army, but how does that transfer? How do you put that down or articulate that onto your resume? And also some of the things that you've done that people look at, like if you say I'm a human intel collector, you say that to most people and they're not going to have any clue what that is. So you need to kind of not necessarily dumb it down, but you need to rework it. Like if you say I'm a recruiter, some people say I'm talent acquisition. So it's just using words and using phrases that people understand and that are relatable to skills on the outside, and that you can actually transfer those based off of how you word your resume to skills on the outside.
Absolutely. And, I think that's one of the things we touch on there pretty well about too, is really skill transfer is a big one. Wording, how to wordsmith them so that it makes sense to the civilian market, looking at job descriptions and roles that you're interested in, identifying the roles and responsibilities within those and seeing how those might be able to fit into your resume as things that at the same time. So real lot of information that we pass on this one. I know on this one particularly, we spent a lot of time on the main focus of that 10-second rule, if you will. So if you don't know, there's a 10-second rule when it comes to your resume is you've got about 7 to 10 seconds for one of us to look at your resume before we pass on it or read more. Meaning that, so in your contact information, if you're cleared, if you've got a clearance and you're applying to cleared roles, it should be certainly at the very beginning of your resume in your contact section, right under there, TSSCI, secret, or what have you. And then following into the objective statement that's very focused on the roles you're interested in applying to. So if you're looking at applying to different types of roles over time, whether it's a program management roles and also individual contributor roles, where you may have to have 2 resumes then because your objective statement's going to probably read a lot different, or it should read a lot different, because you wouldn't want to be applying to program management roles with an individual contributor resume because you'd want to be highlighting your management experience versus on the other side, you would want to be highlighting management experience on an individual contributor role where you probably want to be highlighting more hard skills versus management skills or soft skills, if you may. Those type of things. So that's where we talk about a lot of that kind of stuff is translating your experience from those hard skills, transferring hard skills, because hard skills are what qualify you for the role most of the time, whereas soft skills are what will sell you to the person that you're interviewing with. Meaning that's where you're going to get some of those behavioral interview questions that we talk about on the interview one at the same time. So
good point, Brian. Hard skills get you the interview, and sometimes your soft skills and we'll close the deal. But you gotta get to the interview first. So you got to show that you have the qualifications first.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, no, that's so there's a lot to be gained from this particular podcast that we put on next month on February 21st. So everyone that's on the call today, have no fear. I will send you an invite to what we do. So if you registered for this one, you'll get an invite for the next one as well. And subsequent ones after that at the same time. So, like I said, thanks everyone that's joined us so far today. If you have any questions while we're going through what we're talking about on each slide, certainly feel free to drop them, in the discussion box. But we will get all questions for sure at the very end of the podcast because we do have an hour-long Q&A scheduled if it takes that long. All right. Decoding job descriptions. I do enjoy this one quite a bit as well, especially when we really talk about breaking down the job descriptions, helping folks understand the words and language that we use, required versus desired, and how those things qualify you for roles. Um, you know, breaking down the words that we use within them, though, too, so that you can help transfer some of those words to yourself at the same time, and also do an honest self-assessment on your qualifications within those roles, right? Because really what we try to avoid, help folks avoid doing, is applying to 10, 15, 20 roles, because we all understand it takes time to apply to roles. So you don't want to spend half a day applying to roles that you're not qualified for at the same time. So we really focus on how to put that information together with the job description. And we also talk about how you're going to be able to use the job description to prepare for the interview when we talk about the interview podcast that we do as well. So there's a lot of information to really be gleaned from a job description, because a job description, with most organizations, I can't speak for them all, but I can certainly specifically speak for Peraton, where in our job descriptions, you're going to have an about Peraton section, and then you're going to have a paragraph or so, a little blurb at least, about what the work's supporting. It's supporting U.S. Navy work over here, or U.S. Marine Corps work over here, or SOCOM, or Stratcom, or something. So it's gonna give you a little snippet of what the work's supporting and what they're looking for. And then you're going to get into the responsibilities, where it's going to tell you kind of what the day and the life work's going to mildly look like. Obviously, job description would be blown out of proportion size wise if you put in everything a role is going to do, but it's going to give a quick snippet of what the key responsibilities of the role are. And then it's going to jump into the requirements, desired, and qualifications. And we talk about each block, how to understand the information that's in each block to determine if you meet the required qualifications, desired qualifications, and so forth. So real big one for me on this one. We talk about, understanding or addressing those qualifications with supporting information, and so forth. And that one's a big one. Brent, anything on this one particularly? I'm gonna hit you all three every time. So I'll see you every time. So.
Definitely. Are you asking about the required qualifications, or they address the
coding job descriptions in general? Any insights, or anything you most interested like to talk about when it comes to it?
The biggest one is going over that requisition, understanding exactly what's required / desired, and making sure that you're a semi-fit. Whenever I say semi, everybody says, or everybody has a misconception of, I have to be 100% qualified for this position. It has to be 100% match. And honestly, that's not the fact of the matter. I mean, we're looking at a 75% match, and the rest of it, it's OJT for the most part, because nobody's going to know a job 110%. I saw a comment earlier from Joseph, Jason, as far as like what a military officer does versus say transportation or HR or whatever it is. The qualifications are going to be completely different, and you just want to. I'm trying to word it properly. So I apologize.
No worries.
Completely different thought on that as I went back, but definitely just know the difference between preferred or required and desired is the biggest one. And one of the benefits of our team, which you and Jeff have just ingrained in me, is it's our job to go through those qualifications with the candidates, with the transitioning military members, and going over them step by step, making sure they understand what the desired required is and the differences, and then pushing those resumes over to the hiring managers or the appropriate TAs.
Absolutely. What about you, Jeff? What's yours?
Well, one of the things that I think what a lot of people do is, and what you really have to do is you really got to look at the job description. I'll give you an example. There is a position out there, a systems engineer with missile defense. In the category, it has engineering, so that lets you know it's an engineering background. Tells you the clearance, the location, and also lets you know whether it says no remote or telework allowed. But if you continue to read the job description, right, and it goes to the qualification. It's going to say something about the security clearance again. This particular position says this position requires candidate to be able to obtain a secret security clearance and to maintain the clearance thereafter. Now, if you only stopped at the top of the job description where it says clearance secret, you may have made a wrong assumption and said, I don't have a clearance, so I'm not applying for this position. But if you had read a little deeper in the details of the position, it did say must be able to obtain it. So I know it's self-explanatory to tell people to read the job description, but you really got a one word can make the difference between you being qualified or you just simply bypassing it. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's and I know a lot of people just don't do it, and so I would think that is probably one of the things that I highlight is looking, reading that job description, really having an understanding of not only stuff like that, but also the industry, the category that this position is looking for. So if you don't have an engineering background, you got to understand this is probably not the type of role that you're going to be looking for. You should be applying.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I know, kind of caveating off what you're talking about there as well, for me, it's reading when we're reading the requirements or qualifications is when things say must have, that you typically do must have to have those because I do run into that quite a bit with service members or just candidates in general. It might say, must have 10 years of experience in Python or whatever, and the reason for that is, so if you're close, it's probably still worth applying. And what I mean by close is minute close, meaning like if you're 9 years, maybe 9 years and some change, you might make that cut still. But if you're at 6 years and they're looking for 10, chances are that's a no-go. And the reason for that is, though, what we talk about a lot in the job descriptions, one is that it's a lot of contract work, right? So we don't necessarily write our own qualifications for a role. As the government gives us a statement of work that tells us in order for, such and such person to be able to sit in this seat at our place and do this work, they must have blah, blah, blah. So we have to follow that rule that you must then have that as well within that time frame. So if it's minute close, you could probably work it. But if you start adding years to it, or if you're going through the must-haves and you're checking off no, that you don't have that, it's probably a signal when you're doing your self-assessment to be like, maybe I better move on to a different role then at the same time.
Right.
Good stuff. Moving on down, what are we at? 28 minutes and counting. All right. Mastering resumes and applicant tracking system optimization. So we call them ATSs, so folks know that. So, you hear a lot of folks in talent acquisition / recruiting call ATS. The ATS, you're in the ATS, applicant tracking system. I like doing this one as well, mainly because I've been doing this a real long time and I have seen a lot of resumes. And I have seen some fantastic resumes and some just awful resumes. Some that you almost laugh when you see them because they're just so awful. I think for me, probably some of the big ones, that I put on there is visual appeal doesn't mean more qualified in that sense. So you can have this wonderfully appealing, colorful resume, columns all over the place, but it doesn't pass my 10-second test, because if I got to start going all over the resume to get 10 seconds of qualifications off of it, am I going to do that? Probably not, because I've got 500 other resumes to look at the same time. So that's one that we touch on there for sure. And probably one of the ones I do get a kick out of sometimes are the folks, putting when you put your photo on your resume. I get the point of that as trying to sell yourself as a professional and stuff like that. But that's what LinkedIn's for, okay? So don't put your photo on your resume, please. But on top of that too, there's also more reasons than that, as we do talk about like applicant tracking system optimization, which means everybody's applied to a job online at some point. So what do you got to do? You upload your resume, it parses the information and kind of spits it out for you. Now, depending on the organization, you still might have to fill out the whole experience thing and all that fine jazz. But for a lot of applicant tracking systems, they can't read images though. So I've worked at places, including the federal government, where if a resume had a picture or some kind of weird formatting on it, it would stop reading from that moment on. So a lot of people that put pictures on the resume typically put it right on top. And so then I would have a bunch of, over time, you'd have a bunch of blank resumes in the applicant tracking system because it wasn't reading anything after it hit that picture, which was right at top. So that's one I like to throw in there as well. What about you, Jeff? What about on this one?
Yeah, I mean, it's self-explanatory. I always tell people to put yourself in the seat of a recruiter. And if you have to go through hundreds of resumes and you have some tool to help you kind of sort through them, you would do the same thing. Sometimes some of our requirements have some particular type of skill or requirement or certification that's a requirement. Of course, a recruiter is going to put that in his when he does that sparsing to search for a resume. So that's going to be one of his things, whether it's PMP or whether it's Security Plus, bachelor's degree. He's going to put in some of those things to help to assist them. And this is it helps as far as saving time. You would do the same thing. So just know that if you don't have those things, then you've kind of eliminated you're an opportunity to be looked at or even be contacted. So, and many of these things, I think most people probably heard before. It's the discipline of actually doing it.
Right.
I truly believe that you're a transitioning veteran. You've probably gone through, and you've heard some of this stuff that we're talking about
multiple times.
And it's probably not. Is that you don't know? Is that do you want to do it? Do I want to do the tedious work of actually putting those keywords from the job description in it? But I would tell you're going to do yourself some justice if you do it. But if you don't do it, you'll kind of get the results of you not doing it.
Absolutely, and I think you kind of hit one on there that I like to talk about too when it comes to keywords. I know folks say, well, you should tailor your resume towards every job you apply to. Well, I think that's what we really hit on the head when we have that translating your experience one that we do next month. Because what you're creating is a focused resume then. So when you have a focused resume, you shouldn't have to be changing many keywords on your resume though, because that's kind of a signal that your resume might not be hitting right. If every time you're applying to a role, it seems like you might have to change your resume a lot. That could be a signal that you're all over the place with what you're applying to, or your resume isn't as focused as you might think it is. And I have one more I'll throw in there too before I throw it over to Brent, see what he's got. What I always have people do on a resume too, like when folks are really struggling or they say, my resume looks great to me. And I'd be like, find somebody that doesn't know you very well, that doesn't know like you're getting out of the military and know exactly what you do in the military or something like that, or doesn't know exactly what job you're in right now, or doesn't really 100% know. And then hand them your resume, obviously probably an acquaintance or something. I mean, probably weird to go up to a stranger, but do that too. But I was saying, find somebody to go to, hand them your resume, and ask them, "Can you
go to a job fair?" There's a lot of strangers at job fairs that'll be honest with you.
Hand them your resume and ask somebody, "Can you look at my resume and tell me what I do?" Because you'll be surprised. That sounds very simple, but I've seen a lot of resumes, especially for transitioning service members, particularly officers, because that's how officers seem to work when they're doing their command stuff. We'll see. I'm like, I don't know what you do though. What do you do? That kind of thing. So, that's what I like to throw in there. What about you, Brent? What's your big one on mastering resumes, and the applicant tracking system?
First off, just so everybody understands, no matter how many times you update your resume in the ATS system, it's only ever going to show the last resume that you put in there. So if you change your resume 10 different times for 10 different jobs, those 10 different jobs are all going to have the exact same resume, which is the last one that you uploaded. So that's always something that you need to be aware of. Once you get a hold of that TA, they ask you those questions, or you talk to myself, Brian, or Jeff, that's whenever you can say, hey, I actually have a different resume tailored to that position, that's more focused on what I did and the accomplishments and things like that. That's whenever you forward those over, because you might be applying for, like I said, 10 different jobs, but it's only going to show the last resume for all 10 jobs that you put in there. So a good piece of advice is whenever you're doing your resume and you're sending it out, take a look at that description on those requisitions that you're applying to and use that description as a guide. Go through your resume and say, all right, it's asking for A through Z. And you basically tailor your resume to those qualifications that you do have off of those descriptions. And then at the very end is where you add your additional experience, or additional certifications, or things that you've done in that nature.
Good stuff. Good stuff. And I almost forgot, before we move on, I forgot to throw the plug for the decoding job descriptions. That was on March 21st. So definitely showed that one. And I also wanted to remind folks, this one's on April 25th. That's when the invite for this one will be. But I also wanted to, just kind of reiterate to folks, as we're going through each one of these slides, that this is a snippet of an hour-long session that we do on each one. So if you find the information halfway decent that we're delivering so far, you can imagine when we do the actual hour-long session on each topic, we go into much deeper dive and detail onto why a lot of this stuff's important and how it can really increase your ability to rise in a candidacy pool. Moving on, social networking for job searching. I don't know about you guys, but I think this is probably my favorite one. I really love doing the social networking for job searching one. I think for me, it's because if you would have told me 10, 12 years ago how impactful LinkedIn could be on my career, I would have told you probably not. I mean, really. But here I am now with a massive LinkedIn presence. And LinkedIn, it pays dividends. When you use it right, it pays dividends. Mm-hmm. And I do like to showcase to folks that me personally, the last two times I've even changed roles, I've changed companies. It didn't come from me applying places. I didn't apply anywhere. They found me on LinkedIn and asked me if I was interested and stuff like that. So that's how impactful it can be. And it didn't start that way. Don't get me wrong. I could have messaged. When I started, I probably could have messaged 20 people, but I wasn't doing it right either. We'll teach you that. I wasn't doing it right either, compared to what I know now. But this is one of my favorite ones because we really talk about how to connect with professionals in a way that garners responses. Because I can tell you, the folks here on our team, Brent, Jeff, and myself, we get a lot of LinkedIn engagement. LinkedIn for us anymore is pretty much another email inbox. The messages come all day. So some folks do get a response. Some folks don't, based off what they're putting in there, right? Because it's time. It's a lot of it relates to time. So we really put a lot of focus on how to engage correctly, how to get involved in creating content, and the easiest ways to do it. Because it's a time thing, right? So nobody really wants to spend 3 hours writing an article to put it on there. But we talk about how a lot of those things already exist out there, how to share it correctly and what you can do with that. And also other ways to network within the platform, especially when it comes to job searching and connecting with folks at certain companies, how to find them, what to ask them, and how to ask them at the same time. So that's kind of my big one on there, because I don't like to give up too much on this one because this one's on May 23rd. This is probably one of my favorite ones because we're really getting a dive on this one. And I know Brent and Jeff, highly active LinkedIn users. We post a lot of stuff on LinkedIn. So if you don't follow us on LinkedIn, I did drop our LinkedIn profile links at the very beginning of the discussion box, when we got on earlier. So feel free to add us, all three of us, on LinkedIn, or just Brent if you like Brent the most. If he's got the best beard. Whatever. So, but what about Brent? What about you on this one? What about you for social networking and job searching? I know, I know you like your LinkedIn too.
To me or Jeff? I'm sorry.
Yeah, you.
Honestly, I think social networking is the number one way to kind of get your foot in the door and get the ball rolling. Yesterday, we had the big event over here on MacDill Air Force Base, and it was in the hangar, it was like 55 degrees in there. It was cold. It actually snowed a little bit, so it was actually cold. But by far, meeting people kind of face to face, 90% of the people I talked to that I met yesterday that were transitioning, there was about 35 out of 50 that didn't even have their LinkedIn set up. And I told them, that's your business card. That's pretty much your forward facing. This is who I am. This is what I do. And that's one of the biggest steps that you take. Going to the social events is absolutely amazing. I think it's great. It definitely is kind of an on-the-spot interview style. Whenever you're talking to these guys, it helps them with their elevator pitch, not just your own. So that's one, but I definitely think people need to be more involved with LinkedIn because that is your business card. And there's endless things that you can do with that.
I really think you hit that one on the head, though, too. I know this is Jeff's peeve. That's peeve for the LinkedIn thing. As someone that's been doing this a long time, I do a lot of in-person events. I go talk to, anymore. I think we're doing at least 1 or 2 in-person events a week, and virtual events, though, too. I think as a team, we probably do 3 to 4 somethings a week.
Yeah,
Jeff more than anybody, but Jeff's all over the place. But what I can tell you, what actually happens is, I'll give you an example. Me and Jeff did a job fair on Wednesday. Probably talked to 500 people. I don't know. It was a lot. 500 people. We were there for hours, and we talked to everyone that was there to talk to us. And every person I talked to, I said, "Here's my business card. Here's my LinkedIn. All you got to do is scan the code, and it brings you right to my page. About as easy as you can get." And, when you talk to that many people, and those are folks looking for jobs, right? Because they're at the career fair, they're looking for work. But I only had 8 LinkedIn connection requests, I think, at the end of the day. So I'm like, well, okay. I'm not going to go look for all 500 of you. So, so it's like, so that's an example, of that's how impactful it can be or not be. Because I believe that social networking, we all do it every day. That's my big one. I do it every day. We're all doing it all the time, but I always ask people, but are you closing the deal? Are you saying like, hey, because your phone, you can literally get on your LinkedIn and tap a QR code and say, here, you can scan my boom, boom. It takes 10 seconds to make a LinkedIn connection with somebody. I do that all the time. If I go to happy hour, I probably come out of there with 2 or 3 LinkedIn connections because everybody talks work around here. So, so that's mine. But what about you, Jeff? What about you on this one? I know you got something.
I would probably say all of them are important. You should probably, and if you've never taken a LinkedIn class, sometimes people don't really understand the impact, like you said, Brian, of how powerful social media is, and especially LinkedIn. They don't get it. They just think it's just a bunch of people connecting. But I would also the etiquette guidelines too. So even for those that may say, okay, I got LinkedIn, I sent a connection. We'll talk a little bit more later about the etiquette, the guidelines, because as you mentioned, Brian, it's another email for busy people like us. When you connect with me and you send me a message, how I respond, you may go back into the queue if you did not ask the right questions, provide the right information. If it was just a general, statement and you didn't state what you're trying to do, then I may respond, and now you're back in the queue. It doesn't necessarily mean, with me and you're gonna have 4 or 5 different transactions as far as talking, because I have 100 other people that I have to respond to. So I think the etiquette guidelines as far as what you should say, and what you present is important, because once you make that first, when someone responds to you on LinkedIn, that's gold. Someone stopped and gave you their attention. So you got to make sure that you take advantage of that interaction. So we'll talk a little bit more about the do's and don'ts.
Absolutely. So definitely come to this podcast, folks. This one's probably one of the most hitting podcasts, in my opinion, because it's the most impactful and can have the most impact on your total career. And a little snippet I like to throw out there, though, too, is, folks like us that have been in recruiting, for a long time, in talent acquisition for a long time. I can tell you, when I do regular recruiting and I need to find somebody for a job, I don't go to Monster. I don't go to Indeed. I don't go to a single job board. I go right to LinkedIn. I start on LinkedIn and I stay on LinkedIn until it runs dry of people I can contact. Then I might start going to some job boards. And typically people on LinkedIn will start responding to me though. So how often am I spending on those job boards? We don't really touch them. We don't really have them. We don't utilize them very much because they're littered with folks all over the place, right? You can imagine in the United States just how many people have a Monster account, how many people have an Indeed account, but how many people are utilizing their LinkedIn to have the information I need on there, those type of things. So definitely a podcast worth attending. You will absolutely gain some very valuable information about connecting with industry professionals as well as growing your personal career brand. All right, almost there. Yep, that's it. Okay. Mastering interview success. So this one's on June 20th. This is the final part of the 6-month series that we present. So this one covers interview success, how to build a presence in an interview, if you will, how to use the information from your resume, the information from the job description that you've looked at, prepare answers, because you can pretty much gather that a lot of the questions as far as your qualifications are going to be concerned to meet requirements are going to come directly from that job description. So they're not going to ask you, off the wall, but can you play piano? Or like it's not going to be like that. It's going to be very direct questions when it comes to hard skills, correct? So, but keep in mind though too, an interview, if you're in the interview, it's because you've already cursory over reading review of your resume have met the qualifications. That's why you're getting the interview.
Right.
So the biggest part of it for me is going to be, your behavioral interview questions, your meaningful questions. When we ask, why do you want to work here? Or tell me about yourself. The tell me about yourself one is one we touch quite a bit on because we talk about relevancy. So answer relevancy though too, when we talk about interviewing and how to prepare answer relevancy. Because I can tell you over a long time, I've asked a lot of people, tell me about yourself. And 20 minutes later, they're done talking because they told me about how they go fishing, they play horseshoes, they bowled a 300 one time. And I'm like, wow, okay, well, that sounds enjoyable. Kid, I didn't even know if you even do this job, though. I mean, you must have a good social life for crying out loud. But so we talk about creating answer relevancy, though, too. In that same time, that's the people for me. I love covering that one on, tell me about yourself. You'd be surprised of how many people, there's probably folks of you on the call that have done that. I've personally done it before I learned, the mastery of these things, of how to prep for these type of things. So I've personally done it. My first couple interviews when I got out, what is it, 12 years ago now or something? I don't even know, 13, 14 years ago. I don't know. So, I've done it, so it's easy to do. But we also talk about the behavioral interview questions that really assess how you're able to handle future situations or settings within customer areas. So that's where, you might get those kind of questions, can you tell me about a time that blah, 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 those type of things. So we really dive into those, how to prepare for the interview from all the other courses that we've delivered up until that point, so that you can gain all the company familiarity, job description, mastery, answer preparation, behavioral interview question preparation, problem solving strategies that you might be asked on there, and how to ask meaningful questions that are relevant to why you're there. So that's a big one right there. Jeff, anything you'd like to add on this one?
Yeah, I think just to add to that too, Brian, is the higher level position that you apply for, whether it's a program manager, director, whatever, the higher level positions, you're going to get more hard questions, as you mentioned. Stuff like, let's see, how do you decide what to delegate and to whom? How do you deal with a difficult customer? Tell me about a time you missed a deadline. I've heard of all different types of. I hadn't had to answer all of these types of questions, but I would tell you, when you're going and you're going to be, especially when you're talking about officers and you're talking about field grade officers and colonels, and you're applying for management type roles, you're going to be asked those types of situational questions, just to know how, because you're going to encounter them. And so we'll talk about the answer preparation. That's a big piece to it. It's just not some tell me your strengths, tell me your weakness. No, as you go higher, they're going to ask you more tougher questions than that. We'll cover some examples and some responses as well.
Good stuff. Good stuff. What about you, Brent? Any input on this one? Oh, you got your mic muted.
Brent, your mic's muted.
No,
I need a piece of gum now, though, too.
I'm chewing this one to death. Yeah, pretty much hit the nail on the head. He said everything that I was getting ready to say. The biggest one is after the interview, or as it's coming to a conclusion at the end of the interview, is ask follow-up questions. If there was something that you didn't understand or something that you feel that you should have discussed a little bit further in depth, that's always the best time to throw that out there.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think really at the end of the day, what we really try to get the focus of this particular session on mastering interview success is how different it can make your interview turn out, though. Because a lot of people will interview and don't put in a little bit of work, because this isn't a lot of work to do, but just that little bit of effort to really prep and be ready for it can really make you stand out in an interview, though. Especially if you're going to do a panel interview, there might be 2 or 3 people on the call, especially if it's a virtual interview. Those are pretty common, right? We do those a lot here at Paratime, virtual interviews. So there might be 2 or 3 people on the call. It's on a video. So prepping for that is key, especially when you're getting questions coming from, multiple people throughout the interview process, that, having prepped those things will make you sound very much more professional in demeanor when you answer those, because it's okay to think, of course, but we also cover how to answer questions when you don't know the answer or you don't have the experience. So definitely show up to this one on June 20th. You'll definitely gain some interview guidance from us, if you will. So we'll go ahead. So we're pretty much at the end right here. We'll go into our Q&A here in a minute. What I wanted to really just touch on was, requesting assistance, from our team. If anyone on the call reaches out to us, these are give you some idea of how to successfully communicate with us, so that you will definitely get responses in a timely manner. So if it's your first time communicating with us, certainly attach your resume to the email. If you've already applied to roles or you're planning to apply to a role, include the position ID numbers on every job description at Paratime at the very top. If you've applied already, include those qualifications, include bulleted points on how you meet the required qualifications. And the reason for that is because we can use that information, because we do concierge applications through the process, as Jeff mentioned early in the podcast. So we do work with each individual to, hey, we'll look at it. Hey, give me the bulleted comments. I'll send those directly to the hiring manager and see if we can get you an interview. Allow time for a response. We're out and about quite a bit, or we're doing things like this, or doing other virtual events. So it might take us a day or two sometimes to respond. And then what happens is, we out today and tomorrow, and then by the time we come back the next day, there's 700 things in there. And then the things that we're still trying to catch up on, there's more coming in. You guys know how it works, but, be patient with us a little bit. I know as a team, we're 100% response rate, though. We don't ever leave an unread message in our inbox unless we made it that way so we could come back to it, type thing. But the big one, the real big one, when it comes to, and this is across any social platform, just avoid asking for available positions, though. Don't just shoot your resume over and be like, here's my resume. What do you guys have available? That's not going to fly. We're not going to do the job search for you. So you have to be proactive in that piece. And that goes for social media platforms, though, too. If you're just emailing recruiters on LinkedIn, like, here's my resume. You guys got anything that fits for me? I have no idea. Because to do that, I'd have to read your whole resume. And I'm not reading your whole resume unless I got you qualified for something. But if you've done the exact same process, but you've set the role ID number that you applied to, how you meet the qualifications for the role, all I got to do is copy and paste and send it forward. You've done the work. those type of things. So that's kind of our ask, when you're requesting assistance from the team. Certainly feel free to visit our careers site at careers.peraton.com. We also have the military and veterans site on that as well. It's on the top right. You'll see the Peraton information box that's on the top right there. Just click that. You can see the military and veterans page. On there, we also highlight some military friendly roles, I guess, if you will, where they're typically a fit for someone coming out of the military or who has had experience in the military, like MISO planners and stuff like that. And we also have our complete calendar of events on there too. So you can see all this stuff that we're participating in as far as it comes to career fairs as a team on there. So you can go on there, virtually register for those and participate in those things at the same time. So
that's Brian, going back to that slide you just came up of, this is probably one of the most important.
My bad, Jeff. I forgot to ask.
That's okay, man. I just want to touch on it. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. So, I mean, even if you're on this, I would take a picture of this, screenshot it, whatever, because not only is this a good strategy when you're reaching out to a recruiter at Peraton or the military veteran team, this is a good strategy for any organization, any point of contact. You come from a job fair, this is an excellent blueprint of what you should do, and it'll definitely improve your chances of getting a positive response.
Absolutely, because I can't tell you,
it's gold, man. I mean, I'm looking at it like this is what if I was to poll recruiters throughout the country to say is this what you would expect from people that are requesting assistance, I'd probably say 99% say that's
I just it's such an easy thing to do, so you have to do it. I can just use the job fair again that we just did as an example. I tell that to people even in person, like, hey, shoot me this email that include this information, and then they still just send me the resume. Here's my resume. Let me know if you got anything. Like, I don't have anything, so the company does. But no, that's a good one. I like adding that one in there, Jeff. Appreciate that. So that pretty much concludes our session today. We appreciate everyone sticking around for it. We're going to jump into our Q&A though. So if you've got any questions, feel free to start popping them into our chat box there. And we'd be happy to delve into any question, anything to do with Peraton, resume, reading job description, whatever. But we did talk about your translating experience podcast that we're going to do. That's next month on February 21st. Then we jump into decoding job descriptions on March 21st. Mastering resumes and applicant tracking system optimization on April 25th, social networking for job searching on May 23rd, and mastering interview success on June 20th. So if you've registered for today, heads up, I will send you an invite because I got your name and email. So you will be getting an email invite to the following sessions and so forth. So we appreciate everyone's time that has came today. So we'll move right into our question and answer session. So we got a question. What's the best way to respond to a question when you don't know? Okay. Well, that's on our slide deck for that particular course. But honestly, what you can do when you get a question, like if they ask you, do you know this particular program or how to do this particular set of skill? And you don't, absolutely say you don't. Because I'll tell you why, though. A lot of folks struggle to say they don't know something in an interview. But keep in mind, you're in the interview because they believe you're qualified for the role already, right? That's why they're interviewing you. So this could just be a way of finding out, do you actually know some of these other things? It's not big if you don't, because you can probably learn it on the fly. That's why it wasn't in the required section of the job description or something like that. So they might ask you, hey, do you know how to make pivot tables with Excel? And if you don't, say, I don't. They're like, we'll teach you. Because I will tell you, I have gotten jobs where I said, I don't know that. But what you can also do when you don't know something is also put a relatable skill near that piece of work. Meaning, I'll use myself as an example. When I interviewed for this role, they asked about the Skill Bridge. My boss now asked what I know about the Skill Bridge program. And at the time, when I was in the military, the Skill Bridge program didn't even exist. Not that I'm aware of anyway. So asked me about the Skill Bridge. I had no idea. I've never really heard that of it, other than I know we kind of do some stuff with it around here, but I don't know what it is or how it works or anything like that. But then I said, but I did work an internship program with Operation Warfighter. I was using transitioning service members and transfer them and intern them into government programs. So I didn't know skill bridge, but I could relate something else I did to it to still make it relevant. So it was like, well, you'll figure it out then. It's pretty easy, right? So I still got the job, and it's been other things as well. But that's how you'd want to answer it. You would say no, you don't, but then basically put a relatable skill to how you don't know it, but you'll probably pick it up pretty easy.
And that's a pretty good response, Brian. I mean, nobody knows everything. Most of the time, especially if you have a lot of responsibility, or you have say if you're a director and you have an administrative assistant, he or she is probably going to be more knowledgeable on certain tasks and certain systems to help get the job done. But people understand you don't know everything. Nobody knows um, everything. So yeah, don't fret over that question coming up, like Brian mentioned. It's not going to take you out of the running. The guy that's interviewing you may even come back and say, "I didn't even know how to use it. I just learned it 6
I was hoping somebody else did, right?
I just learned it 6 months ago." And I think transparency that's a good thing. It's not going to kill you. Um, I would go on to say, even at Paraton, we're big at saying, "I didn't know that. I just learned that." It's good information to know. So yeah,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Brett, feel free to jump in, on anything you want to add in. I won't call out at this point. So we got another question. What factors may present, or my mouth's getting dry after an hour. What factors may prevent an individual from being granted an interview despite meeting all the qualifications? Tough one to answer, but I can give you some practical answers anyway on why that might be. There's no hard reason why that might happen. I know sometimes what happens, I can speak for Paraton as an example. As an organization, we get up to 70,000 applications per month, though. So what can happen is we put a role out there. A lot of them are real popular. It might get 200, 300, 400 people that apply to it. It's just unrealistic for us to be able to go through that many people and determine if 400 people are qualified for the role. So it's kind of can be a timing factor when you start looking at a situation like that. If the role's been open for a week and it's gotten that many applicants, they've probably already started reviewing and interviewing, and probably then we might even be to a job offer by the time they've even been able to review your resume in that sense. So that could be a reason right there. Another one, it could be the positions put on hold. As an example, we are a contract company. So a lot of times, the customer would tell us, hey, we need a network engineer here. So we write the job description, we put it up there, and 2 weeks later they say, actually, we're going to have to put that one on hold because we're changing A, B, or C. So then we have to put it on hold, and we can't interview or hire on it at that rate as well. And with that being said, then a lot of folks, well, how come we don't hear anything? Well, that's because it's impossible for us to literally reach out to all the candidates that probably applied, because that's that would take 10,000 people to reach out to all those people. So you may get some automated responses. So automated responses are fine. That's the way of getting a response, right? But those are some reasons, that you might not, get an interview, even if being qualified at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, Brian, you pretty much hit on them, and it's sometimes I have to let people know that it could be a numerous factors. It could be we hire someone internally. We have a thing called Family First program where people that roll off the contract within the company, we try to fill in as many of our requisitions with those internal employees first. And one thing also I've kind of learned too is um, if it's a really common type job, if you apply late in the hiring cycle, where, as Brian mentioned, a lot of people apply. Say there's a help desk position, and the only thing it requires is must be able to obtain a secret clearance and security plus, and maybe some other requirement. Very simple process, very simple job description, where it could be a lot of people applying for it, and you just were It may have been posted on Monday, and you just posted. You apply on Friday. Still open, but they've already screened 10 or 15 people already, as he mentioned. So
Yeah.
I always tell people, don't take it personal. It's a process. You have
Right.
a lot of people applying for multiple jobs, and I think me and Brian and the rest of the team, we echo that. Just how many people apply for certain jobs at certain large defense contractors like ourselves. So
Absolutely. And another thing to add on that a lot of folks don't know is a lot of our roles, because typically a role doesn't come off our job board until it has a start date to it. So even though we might have an offer out to somebody, which of course there's going to be the offer process and all these type of things. So it may take a week or even more sometimes that after we have an offer on it, that it's still on the job board, because if it doesn't have a start date, it may stay on there until it has a start date and comes off at the same time.
Hey, Brian. One of the other things that I explained yesterday to a couple different candidates were this guy said he applied to 5 different roles. He hadn't heard anything. He wasn't dispositioned, but nobody's reached out to him. So pulled him to the side. We talked a little bit, and I pulled up those requisitions. And basically, what it was place markers. So it was positions that we opened up, for SciTech as a network security, cybersecurity specialist, an ISSO, or whatever the job is. But it was a place marker. So the requisition's 200 days old. So basically, what they do is they'll have 500 people apply to that position, and then they'll make one-off positions for each individual person. So say they have 10 positions, but they're just going to have a place marker. So they'll leave that position open, even though that one's not funded, but there's others in the background that you don't see that they're using those for. So
Absolutely.
it definitely isn't the best answer, but it's a way that they kind of gather multiple resumes at one time and then push them out to individual positions.
And you actually hit on something right there too, Brent, that kind of rang my bell, is that what you may see, and this, we're all guilty of it though, of not fully reading job descriptions, but if you actually, like Peraton as an example, we may have contingent upon contract award positions on there. But somewhere in that job description, it actually says, and it's usually highlighted, it'll say contingent upon award or contingent upon contract win or something. It doesn't say win, but I'm pretty sure it says contingent upon contract award or something like that. It'll have a contingency statement in there, and it's usually in bold, which means they're still gathering people because we're anticipating to win the work, so that when we do win the work, we're able to staff it quickly in that sense. What do we got? Anthony. So Anthony's he says he's transitioning from Army Medical and looking potentially to a career with Peraton Skill Bridge program. While working on my resume, most of my skills don't directly translate to a developer position. Should I just use soft skills, my clearance, my degree, Security Plus as a way to get a good look? Yes, if that's what you have to go with, for sure. But keep in mind when you're looking at the job descriptions, make sure you are meeting the requirements of the job description, though, in that sense. So I wouldn't necessarily use soft skills as a focus because it'll be too broad, I would think, if you're using soft skills as a focus. Because I would probably think what you can use as experience on your resume. I know folks that are maybe doing a skills shift in their career. There's things you can probably already do, because experience doesn't have to do from things you get paid by an employer to do. Experience is what you know how to do. So you might even be on your own running Discord servers, doing stuff in GitHub or whatever it is. You might have home server, you name it. So things you know how to do count as experience though too. So you can add those kind of things to your resume at the same time. But I wouldn't go too heavy on soft skills though, because it might be too broad. At the same time, but as long as whatever you're putting on there meets the requirements, whatever the requirements say should be matched to your resume. I should be able to say, I need this, he has that.
Mm-hmm.
What about you guys? Anything on that one? I mean, that one's a tough one, because I know we do have a lot of transitioning service members that are doing skills transfers and shifts.
Yeah, I mean, it the one thing about when you're kind of shifting from one area to the next and you're acquiring certifications, Sometimes you have to take a step back and take maybe a lesser role. Um, I have to tell people that all the time. It's you're not a senior person. You're more of an entry level, mid level. Even though you have certain certifications, the years of experience may not line up. So um,
Right.
sometimes you got to take a step back and take a lesser position, get your foot in the door, get a little bit more experience, and prove to that organization that even apply, after maybe a year or so, and then apply for that particular type position that you were looking for. So, um, yeah, because
Yeah,
sometimes
absolutely.
people change careers, and I'm like, sometimes you're going to be entry level because you don't have years of experience to go along with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one thing to kind of keep in mind though too, Anthony, if you're doing a skills transfer like that from more of the Army medical background into a developer background, um, is looking at what organizations or companies might be prone to have more of those. I'm guessing it's going to be entry level then at that rate if it's not what you're doing. If they have more of the entry level or junior level roles that you could get into at the same time. Because I can tell you that Paraton, we don't have a significant amount of entry level roles because we do contract work and the government doesn't usually do entry level work, if you will. Especially with the customers we're supporting on a regular basis and the national security missions that we focus on. So there's not going to be a significant amount of entry level work on there. There is, don't get me wrong, but then you're going to run into what we were talking about on the last question is those entry level roles for us are going to get just bombarded with candidates.
Yes.
And so even for us, even though we work here, I could send 10 candidates over there and it's still hard for me to puncture through that many candidates. So keep that in mind. So organizations that you're focusing on would be a key part of making that a little more successful in a transition piece as well. And SkillBridge, especially if you're looking to do SkillBridge, I can definitely plug one of our partners right now. I would definitely say look at Empower, capital N Power, Empower. We work with them pretty regularly, and they take folks through certification processes. They have employers like us on their list that they work with to try to get folks hired at organizations as well.
Hired our heroes as well.
Yep. HOH, the old HOH cohorts. What do we got here from JS? He says, "Wow, 70,000 applicants." Yep, that is real. So we do have validation processes. You bet. So that's 70,000 legit candidates, right? So there's no scammers. Most of our work does. I think all of our work requires U.S. citizenship. That's just because of the customers we support. So those are real numbers right there. Those are static individual applicants. So it might be, so we say applicants, that doesn't mean it's 70,000 people a month. Because Jeff might come on our page today and say, I'm going to apply to these 5 roles.
Right.
That type of thing. But all 5 times he's applied has to be touched. What do we got from Michael? For clarification, if we find positions we're interested in, we should apply via the Paraton careers page and reach out to us for veteran support and your guidance mentorship. Absolutely. But just when you reach out to us, still include your resume so we can find the right Michael in there. Because like I said, we get that many candidates and applicants a month. There's a lot of people in our applicant tracking system. So just include your resume so we have all the information necessary to make sure we're finding the right individual. Include those rec ID numbers you're applying to. Certainly include some bulleted pieces to us why you meet those qualifications. And I can tell you that makes it real easy for us to just copy and paste it right over and send it directly to recruiters and hiring managers.
Yep.
Much faster. He said, thank you. Very helpful for the CSP search. Yep, absolutely. Because SkillBridge, CSP, they kind of correlate together.
Yeah.
He said, thanks, Dad. Yeah, a lot of Michaels in there. I ain't gonna lie to you. There's probably 4 or 5 million Michaels in there.
And Brian's and Brent's and Jeff's.
Yeah, Brian and Brent's. Yeah. Heck, just at that company.
Yeah.
So the question is, what is an example of a hiring process from beginning to end at a high level? Well, I mean, if we're going to break the whole thing down, I suppose would be, you're going to apply. From there, it's from what happens when you apply. When you apply, you're going through an automated system kind of first, because when you apply to a role, you're probably going to get asked a couple questions. Do you have this clearance? Yes or no. Are you a U.S. citizen? Yes or no. There might even be some other questions on there, but there's usually one or two or three questions that, as you're applying, it's going to ask you. So that's like your initial phase in or out right there. So if it requires a top secret clearance and you only have a secret, so when it says, do you have a top secret, you hit no, chances are within the next 24 hours, you're going to get an automated email that says you're not going to be considered for the role at that rate. But say you did have the clearance, you passed all that. What goes on from there is you go on to a review. So you go into recruiter review. So that's where a recruiter has to physically click on your name in there and look at your resume and determine if you're qualified for the role. And if it's a yes, if they automatically think yes, then they share it with the hiring manager for the hiring manager to review if they'd like to interview you or not. If it's a no, then you'll get another automated email from the system, because we track all this stuff. So everything's going to be automated. So even though a recruiter looked at it, it'll still be an automated response from our applicant tracking system that you were reviewed and not moving further in the selection process type thing. But once you go to that, so if you go to the hiring manager says, yes, let's review or don't review, kind of the same process. So every time it's a no in that process, you get that automated message, because we don't reach out individually to each individual person until it gets to the interview phase. So if the hiring manager wants to interview, that's when you will finally get that first contact, more than likely from the recruiter, that's going to say, hey, we reviewed your information, like to get in contact with you real quick, set up, because they're probably going to have some questions to ask you while they're going to possibly set up that resume. They might, hey, just verify, you got that top secret clearance, right? Yada, yada. So they may have like a screening piece as they're getting ready to send that interview up as well. And then from there, of course, then you do the interview, offer phase. So the hiring process for us is really, I think we're around 30, 35 days, I think, from start to finish, from when you've got an offer to when you start. Brett might know that better than me. He was over there a lot sooner than I was.
We like to keep it around the 2-week mark, but some of those positions, just based off of, I don't want to say changing requisitions or changing requirements, but that does happen a lot. So 2 weeks is what we aim for. 30 days is kind of the no more than where we want people to be.
Right.
That's dependent on also, whether they're local or they're going to have to move in. So it's going to be an additional, 2 weeks for them to come on site, so on and so on.
Yeah. So that's kind of the basic. That's the basic rundown right there, anyway. But keep in mind, you will get majority automated responses. Even if somebody actually looks at your stuff, you're probably still going to get an automated response because that's how we track our data in our systems, right? In that sense. So,
with that being said, also, Brian, is those automated responses, it only takes one oops, I clicked the wrong button for that thing to hit the disposition folder. And with the way our ATS is now, if somebody, I'm telling you, if somebody's application goes in a disposition folder as TA, they're no longer allowed or able, they don't have the access to pull that out and stick it back in review or over to the hiring manager. You have to actually go through multiple steps, i.e. Heather, and have Heather release it and unlock it for us to pull that application back out, all because of a oops, I accidentally hit no instead of yes, or whatever the case is. So
absolutely.
I only want to pay attention.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Jeff.
No,
I thought you were going to say.
No, I know.
But technically speaking, it's going to vary by organization. But there's kind of a rule of thumb. If you apply to something and 2 weeks have passed and you haven't heard anything, that's usually a good sign for me anyway, that I'm probably not in line for that role at that rate. Now that's not every organization, but I know here at Peraton, we have a lot of I don't want to say rules, but we have a lot of standards, if you will. So we have a standard process which says, we can't leave folks just hanging out there unapplied, if you will. So we have to disposition our folks. So if it's been 2 weeks and you haven't been called for an interview, that doesn't mean you didn't get a disposition email. What means it probably went into your spam folder or something like that. I get that quite a bit. You'd be surprised how many people I email that I never hear back from, or that email me 6 months later and be like, "Oh man, I didn't see your message. It went into my spam." And I'm like, "Well, so we moved on now, man. Sorry." Those type of things as well. So, um, oh, and another thing I wanted to add in there, I almost forgot about it because we were talking about, we were talking a lot about applying and stuff like that here over the last couple of questions. Is I really wanted to let folks know. I think I can't remember if Brent touched on it or not. Is when you're applying to Peraton, you can only apply to Peraton via Peraton's website. Okay. So say you're on Indeed, Monster, LinkedIn. So if you're quick applying on Indeed, you haven't applied to Peraton. Monster, you haven't applied to Peraton. LinkedIn, you haven't applied to Peraton. Even if it says quick apply, you haven't applied to Peraton. You have to apply through the careers.peraton.com website. Because what happens is when you hit, say you're on LinkedIn and you hit the LinkedIn quick apply, you're basically going to a folder for somewhere on LinkedIn that says, "Hey, Brent applied to your role. He's interested into it." It just basically you're applying for interest for somebody else to have to go back in there and look at it. So if you do see roles on places like LinkedIn or any of those places, look for that role on the actual organizational website to apply to it. Because what you'll find out may happen sometimes is you're going to try to look for that role on the organizational website. You're like, "I can't find it," because it doesn't exist anymore. So the company that scrapes our site, say LinkedIn might scrape our site every 72 hours or something like that, which means they're basically pulling all the jobs from our site and putting it on there. So that role could have closed on Monday, but now it's Wednesday. You're like, "Oh yeah, I want to apply to that," but it's closed. It's already been done closed in that sense as well. So just keep that in mind, and don't let it fool you though either. LinkedIn's got a whole bunch of metrics it keeps, but if you find a role you like, you feel qualified for it, and LinkedIn says, "Hey, 400 people applied to this," because it tells you how many people clicked the link. They didn't. That just means 400 people clicked the link. That doesn't mean they went to that organization's website to apply, which is going to be most companies that I've worked for. I think since I've been doing this, I don't think I've ever seen anything where you did a quick apply on LinkedIn and it came to our applicant tracking system at any company. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, you're absolutely right on that one, Brian. I can attest to that in years past where I've thought I applied for a position and went to the careers page, and first of all the job wasn't there anymore. So
Right. Well, I mean, I have folks reaching out to me on LinkedIn all the time. They'll be like, "Hey man, I've applied to like 15 jobs. I haven't heard a thing. Like I've heard crickets." And I'm like, "Okay, well, give me your email address. Let me look you up in there." And then I'm like, "You haven't applied to any roles here. What are you talking about?" They're like, they're like, "Hi, LinkedIn." I'm like, "Nah, man, you gotta apply." Like you were never going to get a response. So.
yep.
So Jason says, we know we touched on it earlier, but have you guys ever referred anyone and they were able to get an interview that was like a good 75% match? In other words, have you taken a chance on anyone and they wound up exceeding expectations? Oh yeah, for sure. When we look at resumes and we kind of review them, we've got a pretty good idea what qualified sort of looks like. I think as talent acquisition professionals like we are, we're certainly not. I'm not a software engineer, software reverse engineer, malware engineer, or whatever, reverse malware engineer. I'm none of that stuff, man. I don't know any of that kind of stuff. But I'm real good at reading job qualifications and requirements. So we're really good at being able to look at your resume, look at the required qualifications, and seeing if it's a feasible match. Because we are aware that they might ask for 10 things, but they really only need the 7, which that's used to it, so absolutely. So that happens quite a bit. You'll be surprised. Most people that get the interview and get hired are probably more around that 70-75% match, because they're just not going to have everything in a job description. And that's across the board. I mean, I've ran into some software engineers that have been doing it for 25 years and well, you don't have that one tool. Well, there's 7,000 different tools to develop software in. So, I think you're looking for the skill viability on stuff like that as well. So yeah, we definitely do refer folks over that meet a good portion of it.
Yep. And the one thing about too also, Brian, as far as when you're referring someone, um, and they don't meet all the qualifications. During the interview process, if you can display success, as far as data and how you've successfully accomplished these things, that sometimes that will um, turn the tides when it comes to you possibly being selected for the position. So qualifications are not all of them, because I can remember just personally being interviewed and people asking me just common sense questions like, when you're screening a person, should you verify that they have a security clearance? And I was like, well, yeah, like that's like I thought it was like common sense. The guy was like, no, it's not common. I interviewed a guy last week and he thought it was okay to send me 10 resumes of people, and he didn't bother to screen to see if these people had active security clearances. And so, um,
Oh,
yeah, so I've situations like that. So as you mentioned, Mike, we don't have all the qualifications. It's we don't stop at that point. We try not to get in the mode of disqualifying people for positions that we don't have the power to say no to. Now, if it's got to be in the ballpark because it's our reputation, but I try
right.
not to take on that role of the final decision maker if you're in the ballpark.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we're, what I can tell you, we are a team of a team of folks that we are the screen in people, right? We're trying to screen you in, not screen you out.
Right.
So, I mean, if I could get you close, if I can get you a 50%, I might even send it. I'll be honest with you. But a good way for us to kind of combat that, if you will, is to address it up front, though. So if you're looking at a requisition and you're going to send me your kind of bulleted, like, hey, this is where I meet, this is how I meet the requirements of this role, but there's those 2 or 3 requirements on there you don't necessarily meet all the way, or you don't meet at all, address kind of you would in the interview. So say, hey, I don't know this one, but I've used A, B, or C, A, B, and C, or whatever it is that's relevant and close and similar, if you can, so it can at least say, well, you don't use, Microsoft Access, but you're really good at Excel, so you should be able to pick it up. Or so, I'm just using those basic ones as an example, but I would assume it'd be like using AWS cloud versus Azure. I mean, they do the same kind of things. It's just different environment, right? So it's probably not that simple. Any cloud guys on here, I apologize. But, I'm just saying, to the layman as myself, it's not a cloud engineer. But that's what we can do though, too. So I think the easiest way for that one is really addressing any significant lack of requirement that would be on there, addressing it up front, and then introducing any relevant other skills you may have to combat not having that piece.
Because Jason, somebody had to take a chance on all of us service members. The reality, somebody had to take a chance on, unless you exactly in the civilian, what we do in the military lines up exactly what the civilian said. You had to take a little bit of chance. I mean, like Brian mentioned, I was a former Army recruiter. We did recruiting in the Army world. Well, it's a little different from out here. Well, people got to be able to, give you a chance to prove that you can still do it. That's why you have to, if you get your foot in the door, if you get in front of someone, you must convince them that you can do the job. And so,
and I always like to think, we're all former Army recruiters, pretty much. So,
yeah.
So we don't like to be told no either. So
yeah,
no doesn't sit well with me. So if they come back and even say no, I'm like, well, why? Why? So so that's what I think what makes our team real good though, is we're aggressive at going at it though too. Like, we'll throw it up there. If I can get you 75%, I'd probably be pretty happy about it, to be honest with you. Met the clearance, 75% of the qualification, showed me why you're qualified. I felt like, shit, that's
yeah.
easy. What else we got? No more questions? I know you guys got some questions on here. Quiet group. Maybe they're driving. Maybe we're on the podcast drive home or something. But let me go back. I'm going to take the slide back to this one, though, so we can just kind of look at it real quick. Should you have a photo on your resume? Absolutely not.
No.
No photos on a resume.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, that's a no-no. For many reasons, but the big one is that it might not be read by the applicant tracking system. So that's actually one. So if you can see on the screen, I don't know if you're on the phone, perhaps. We actually do a class on April 25th, actually, on resumes and applicant tracking systems, and because the applicant tracking system may not be able to read your picture. So what happens when an applicant tracking system parses that resume and hits that picture? It can just put it all together, and you're basically putting a blank resume or a resume with little or less information on there. Kind of depends on the applicant tracking system. Not to mention it's not industry standard to put a resume on there.
Picture on it, yeah.
Yeah.
And Brian, if you really, here's
Okay.
another way to get your picture on your resume, but not really put it on there. Is put your LinkedIn URL on it.
There you go.
People click on
Absolutely.
your LinkedIn URL, it goes directly to your LinkedIn page. Your LinkedIn page should have a photo on it. Basically, a
Right.
photo.
Right. But don't have a photo of yourself at the shooting range or something like
No,
that.
no.
You know?
And I get the whole professional image and everything because especially coming from the military. We have these DA photos, and we just feel like I
Yeah.
want to show people that I'm a professional, and I'm okay with that. And in some cases, some people, some positions that are not, they may not be technical, and maybe you're applying for a communications role or a human resource role, and you're going to be kind of the face of that organization in that particular department. Yeah, it's probably good that you have a professional LinkedIn photo up there because people are going to be clicking on you and looking at you, and your company may utilize social media a lot. So it's nothing wrong with having it. You just don't want it on your resume. And when you do it, it really, to me, I think it really shows that you really didn't get an understanding. You didn't do any research to even know whether that's a good idea or not. And so,
Yeah.
um, yeah. But you put your LinkedIn URL on it. You should have it on there anyway. So, you know,
Yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely. So Nidhi asked, does the presence of a role on the website mean the role is unfilled and Paraton is still looking for candidates? Yes, no. So yes, so that's a two-part answer. That means yes, the role is technically unfilled, but no, it does not mean we are still looking for candidates, meaning it still will remain on the website until it has a start date on it. If I remember, I'm pretty sure that's correct. Brent might know better than I because he's filled roles a lot sooner than I have, but it usually stays on the website at least until it's got a start date or an accepted offer. I'm going to guess. So once the offer gets accepted, they may close it, but it may stay open. It will stay open as they're going through the offer processes. So if the candidate's negotiating an offer, yada, yada, then, it may stay open for a period of time as that process is taking place. So that way, if the candidate ultimately declines the offer, we can still go back to the original candidate pool without having to open a new role.
That's correct, Brian. But also, we're also putting up any of our proposal positions up there as well. So, like before we actually won SciTech, we actually put all those requisitions out there, saying, "Hey, we have these positions." It did have that clause in there saying, "Upon award," contingent upon award. A lot of people do miss that little clause in there because they're so excited. They're like, "Oh my God, this is what I did. I can do this. I qualify 100%." But just because it's up, running, and on the website, you can apply for it. Best thing that I can tell you to do is to reach out to one of us three, unless you know somebody else within Paraton. Have them look that position up and see if it is funded or if it is still a proposal.
All right. So, question: what is at liberty to be discussed pertaining to what advice can be provided to those that are eligible to obtain a security clearance but do not have one or have had one? Can we explain the dynamic? It's almost catch-22 situation of obtaining security clearances being sponsored by an organization. So you are right there, JS. It's not having a clearance and trying to get one is a difficult task. It's a long road, that's for sure. There's ways to go about it is finding roles that will sponsor a clearance. I know here at Paraton, when we have roles that'll sponsor a clearance, it'll say secret clearance or ability to obtain. If it doesn't say or ability to obtain, it's a must-have. So if ability to obtain means we'll sponsor you to get the clearance. So without that little sentence on there, that means it's a must-have and it's an automatic disqualification if you don't have the clearance. Now, as far as obtaining one, how do you go about obtaining one? There's no easy rule of thumb. If there was, everybody would go do it. Especially, I know I'm here in the National Capital Region here outside of DC, and every other person wants to know how to get a clearance. So, but it's a highly cleared area at the same time. But sometimes it's career goal. If your career goal is going to require you to have a clearance to be able to get your career going in the direction you want it to go, there are organizations and roles that do those things. I know one. I'll just use it as an example. One that I've seen used, especially for transitioning service members or veterans that have gotten out, and they want to maintain their clearance while, excuse me, and they want to maintain their clearance while they're going to school or finishing their master's degree or something like that. I see them take part-time jobs. As an example, we have a lot of security organizations around here where they're kind of the door guard or the front desk guards and stuff like that, or they're guarding areas. And they'll maintain their clearance because those are all cleared positions around here in the DC area anyway. So they'll take that job part-time to keep the clearance while they're going to school and working another full-time job somewhere else, because the security job might not pay what they're looking for, but they're getting to keep their clearance because of the value of the clearance. But those organizations will get you clearances as well. But what you have to keep in mind when obtaining a security clearance, it's not a easy process either, though, in the sense, just to get a secret clearance alone, 6 months to a year, maybe 18 months. I mean, you start going SCI level clearance or a poly clearance from nothing. If you don't have one, that's 2-3 years possibly before you might get adjudicated and be actually cleared to hold that clearance. Because those do take a significant amount of time. The length really kind of depends on you because it's going to be based on your background and how long those are going to really take in that sense as well. So unfortunately, there's no easy answer on how to do that. Without it, it's just beating the system at that rate, is finding those roles that will give you the ability to obtain. No, problem. That's a common one. The security clearance one is a common one. I give you an example. Like one of the roles we have here, we also have background investigator roles, where you can get a clearance on the background investigator role, but you have to live in the city within a certain mile radius of a zip code even to be qualified for the role. They are, I don't want to say entry level. They don't require any experience, but they're looking for a certain type of individual to do that role as well. And it does require a year commitment for the clearance as well, or you have to pay back the cost. Good stuff. Well, any other questions? I don't think we have many other questions coming in. There we go. So when a contract ends, what happens to the role? Well, it kind of depends. So when a contract ends, that doesn't mean the work ends necessarily. So that just means another company may be taking over the contract, and at that rate, then they have to then take on the employees or the contractors. So then they have to send them, they have to have them apply, send them offer letters because they become employees of that company. Or, Paraton wins the rebid and we keep the same employees. Or we have, as Jeff mentioned earlier, the Family First program here, so that when we have folks that are coming off of work that's ending, we redeploy them throughout the company. Will the slides and recordings be available to participants? Yes, but not immediately. So if you go to our careers.paragon.com website and see our military and veterans page, it's on the upper right. You'll have the pull down thing. I did put a link to it at the very beginning of the chat, though. If you go to our military and veterans page, almost at the very bottom is our previously recorded sessions. They'll be a little different than the one you're having right now, but all these other previous ones we did the last 6 months will be on there as well. But you're still going to get an email for the next sessions anyway. So come join us. We're a good time. All right. Well, I think that probably about just wrap it up. I'll throw it back at you guys real quick. If Brent, Jeff got any last final thoughts, if you will, the old Jerry Springer final thought.
No.
Jeff, you want to take it first?
Well, I would say continue to learn. Things are ever changing. Continue to join our podcast. Even if you learn one thing you never know one thing that you can learn that could help you land that job or to better improve your chances of, doing that interview, social media. I truly believe that the whole process, especially those that are transitioning out of the military, it's such a long process. You don't get it all in 1 week of tap. You don't get it from one little posting, someone posting, do these 5 things and you'll land a job. I just don't believe that book. I think it's a long process of continuing learning because it's so many different areas of the process that requires you to master, which is difficult to do. We are always learning. And so we just try to come on these podcasts to share what we've learned and give you some of our experiences and how how to engage recruiters. So I would end it on that.
Gotcha. Nice. What about you, Brent? Any last thoughts?
Last thoughts, I guess my wrap up would be definitely use us to y'all's advantage. If you have a question about something, if you need help with something, if you need to walk through something, please don't hesitate to reach out to one of us. That's what we're here for. We definitely love networking with y'all, so please don't hesitate. And hope everybody has a great rest of, I guess, a great weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. And my final thought would be, it's stressful. Job hunting is stressful. Regardless of whatever phase of it you're in. If you're transitioning, been out 2 days, 10 years, already employed, looking for another role, it's stressful. But it really comes down to patience and timing. A lot of it's timing. There's really no secret sauce to timing. It either just is or isn't. So it's kind of just having that patience, really focusing on the networking side can be more beneficial sometimes. So just patience and realize you're not the only one going through it. Everybody that's looking for a job is going through this same terrible process of trying to find one. So that's why we're trying to really give you information to help boost your candidacy up the pipeline a little bit or a lot of it. Because if you do all these things, you'll really bump yourself up the candidate likelihood list. So that's all from us today. So on behalf of Peraton and our Peraton Military and Veterans team, we'd like to thank you for joining us today. It's been wonderful. Everyone will receive an invite for our next upcoming sessions as well. And thank you. And we look forward to hearing from some of you on social media very soon.